you look at like a situation with Rick Rubin, I had to set up microphones in front of him, and just that stress, the anxiety.
He knows a lot about microphones.
What did he say, which I really loved? He's like, "How close do you like the microphone to be?" It's like
that's a very Rick Rubin kind of thing, right? That the details really matter.
Yeah.
The details really matter, right down to your relationship to the microphone, right?
Yeah.
Distance and whether or not it brings out the timbre in your voice. But of course, that's what he does. He produces music.
But he also said, like, he is the professional. He said, how close do you like it to be? And he said it with a gentleness where I had like an existential crisis where I don't know. He gave me so much like, wow, like he made me feel like an artist, like that the microphone distance is a decision you're supposed to make.
Well, I have to say, and this has actually come up in some of our conversations about you. I mean, you are an artist. And actually Joe Rogan, once I heard him talking about podcasting and the fact that he's always trying to get better at it, and he described podcasting at one moment as an art, right? And it's a certain medium of communication, and there's a cadence and a rhythm that when it's working, it really can facilitate the transfer of information. When it's not, it doesn't. I mean, obviously Joe, just being himself, has tapped into that cadence that allows, and it's made so many people excited to hear him talk.
Well, in his case and in general, I think part of the art is refusing the world as you get a bigger audience, change who you are.
There's one quote that I've seen out there where he says, I'm like talking about himself. He says, I'm like the fish that got through the net. There's no stage version of me, right?
Yeah.
How he is in person is how he is, out in the world. And of course, there's nuance to his life, right? And his different relationships, of course. But it's true. I mean, we've had the great fortune of spending time with him out away from the microphones, so to speak. Joe is Joe.
So can you speak to that process? You mentioned the walking and the talking to yourself, because that's fascinating.
Yeah. I try and do a couple of things. First of all, when I was a kid, I had a little bit of a grunting tic. When I was 5 or 6, I would feel this buildup of tension in my throat, and I would do this grunting tic. If I get very tired, I start to do it still. We actually know that this is related to these basal ganglia circuits for go, no go. You've got an accelerator and a brake, basically, in your neural circuitry. And kids with Tourette's and OCD, the brake doesn't work quite as well. And so one thing that happens is if I wake up in the morning, and especially if I'm well rested, if I'm not well rested, I do a hypnosis or yoga nidra in order to recover my sleep. That works really well. But then once I'm into the process of preparing the podcast, I've already gone through my notes. I know what I want to say more or less in a kind of general contour. And then I take a walk, and I try to, so no phone with me, and I try to assess whether or not my energy is too high or too low for podcasting. Mm-hmm. Because when you podcast, as you know, you have to punch out a lot of material, but then there's times when you really need to slow down and emphasize and articulate. And so what I do, I've never revealed this. What I do actually is I will recite the lyrics of songs for about 10 minutes, songs I love, while I walk out loud.
It calms you and focuses you. What does it do for you?
I think it gets my vocal cords warmed up, and it also...
Do you sing or speak them?
I often sing them. And fortunately, nobody hears. And as I do this, I start to evaluate whether or not I'm straining to get the words out, or whether or not I'm straining to make them slow enough so that I can articulate them. So there are days when I have so much energy that I'm trying to speak faster than I should in order to articulate properly. There are other days when I'm tired and I can't sort of keep up with my thoughts. And so what I try and do is assess that and then adjust the transmission, the RPM, so to speak. For instance, I can speak very quickly and then I can slow down. So I can change the cadence of my voice. And when you teach in the classroom, you learn, as you know, because you're an excellent teacher, I've watched your lectures in the classroom. As you teach in the classroom, when you want to slow down, every teacher knows you turn to the whiteboard or chalkboard and you start writing, right? It gives you a break. And then you turn around and you fire back the kind of machine gun fire of information, and then you slow down or you underline something. When you podcast, you don't have that opportunity, right? There are no visuals in my podcast. So what I try and do is always get my voice warmed up and make sure that I'm thinking and speaking at approximately the same rate. And then I also do this thing of I put my vision into panoramic vision when I walk, which is very calming. And then I actually start to remind myself of the purpose of podcasting. This sounds very mission statement-y, but you asked what I do.
Yeah.
I remind myself first and foremost that what I want to communicate, what I want to come through is the beauty and utility of biology. And I only feel comfortable saying the word beauty publicly now about science things thanks to you, because I think
love and beauty.
Yeah,
Embrace it.
Love and beauty.
Dr. Andrew Huberman.
Love and beauty, but also darkness and hatred. And if you're talking about the Lex Fridman podcast, you have to address the shadow, also the shadow side. But I think about I want to communicate the beauty and utility of biology, and then I check my emotional state. I want to make sure that I'm not angry about anything. And certainly if I am, that I'm going to set it aside for the podcast, because that's not a place for my whatever I might be dealing with. I also really start to feel into the parts of the research and the papers I found that I really love, because that's the part of me that I like the most, frankly. And on the podcast, if there's a paper, like for instance, we have a podcast coming out soon about heat as a tool. Sauna, but some other things. And in researching this, I learned so much about these heat shock proteins and the use of sauna in Finland for increasing growth hormone, but also for the treatment of mental illness. And I realized I fell in love with this literature. It's just a beautiful literature. These people are true pioneers for doing this work. Now everyone's into sauna, but this was 20 years ago. The way the experiments were done were amazing, with all these Finnish people with thermocouples up their rectum to measure temperature, swimming in pools. It's hilarious and great. And so I start to think about it, and I think, I just start to really access my love of the work. And then when we finally sit down, meaning my producer Rob and I, and record, I just sort of want to just bask in sharing it. Just like the little version of me when I was 6 or 7, I used to spend all weekend reading the encyclopedia, Guinness Book of World Records, making my mother drive me places to introduce me to, I had this obsession with trapping animals when I was a kid, meet these people. And then on Monday, I would insist on giving a lecture in class, just as a little kid. So that's basically what it is. I just try and access that childlike energy. And so I want to be clear. The goal is always to make the information interesting, clear, and actionable. And if it's also surprising, then that's a bonus. But that's basically the process. But yeah, I'm singing and talking and getting into state. And I used to feel very sheepish about sharing any of this. It's the first time I've ever shared it out loud. But Rick was the one who encouraged me to find a process that works and continue to develop that process and not let anything get near that process. People in my personal life know this. And when it's time, it's like, I don't care what else is going on. I'm moving into that brain state.
And there's probably a process like that for anything that you do in life that you take seriously. So the people that have perfected this is athletes. Like if Olympic level athletes, they have to have a process like this.
And I think Tiger Woods actually was taught self-hypnosis quite young, and used self-hypnosis often during his tournaments, sometimes to great success and other times less so.
Is there other places in life that you use kind of a protocol, like a mental protocol to get ready?
Many of the best areas of life are their own form of hypnosis, right?
True.
You know that you're in hypnosis if, for instance, you're in a movie and something happens and you feel the emotional lift without being self-conscious about it. Yes, I think that one thing that we've tried to do in our house is around meal times to try and set a state that food isn't just something that we just throw down our throats. And I'm fortunate that, my partner cooks really well. And so I try and give her the space to do that. And that's a whole thing of her getting into state. And then
for the cooking, the preparation of all
I can just see it. I just see the way she approaches the whole thing and the pleasure in serving it. And I'm an eater, not a cooker. But
both are important roles. You could be a very good eater. Like there's something about, is there anything better in this world than that feeling, especially if it's a family, getting around a table, just the warmth of that. I don't know, it's like the cold outside of the cruel world cannot touch you in this place that you return to. And if,
did you grow up eating meals as a family?
Yeah. I
And
mean,
you sit down, no television.
no, well, I didn't really have television, period, outside of meals. So most of my time was spent, like a stray cat, outdoors, just running around, playing soccer.
I imagine you in this like dirt or concrete lot between two very high-rise buildings playing soccer
Yeah,
in
very accurate.
in like athletic gear that you only see in Eastern Europe. You know how like you come to the
Right.
States and people wear their athletic gear, and you go to Europe and you see maybe it's the soccer culture,
Yeah.
but you see athletic gear that you just don't see anywhere else.
That's interesting. I mean, we grew up pretty poor, so first of all, I was always wearing my brother's, who's an older brother's clothes, and they were like old. Like my favorite things were American things that I didn't understand. It would be like a Pepsi shirt or something, and it would just that was the gear, and it was like too large for me. But I thought I was the coolest person ever, just wearing this fancy like Kanye like type of fashion.
Yeah, there's something about it. I feel like in Eastern Europe they wear athletic gear where like the guys like zip up the collars.
That's like fancy stuff. That's if you like, those are the cool kids.
I see.
Like the cool soccer players, football players that like they were in a league of some kind, so they would get uniforms or they somehow. I always thought anyone who had anything nice had to do something really bad to get it. That was my view of the world, because I guess I didn't understand how it's possible to be rich, because most of us were surrounded by people who are poor, and that life was beautiful and simple. And it's like, why do you escape that life? But you still admire the cool. Like when we got McDonald's, it was like, what kind of world does this place come from? Like, who invented this? It's a fascinating view from a child's perspective of capitalism, essentially.
Yeah, but the fact that you ate dinner together is really interesting.
Yes.
My parents divorced when I was an adolescent, so then there was a total fracture of any family structure. But prior to that, we ate dinner together every night. I was expected to know how to use my knife and fork, and it was like a very structured thing. I don't know if kids do that now. If I ever have kids, they're going to do that. And certainly, actually on the way over here, I was like, I really want a lot of kids. I want like a whole litter. And I was thinking, if Lex has kids and I have kids, then we can like pit them against each other with jujitsu.
Yeah, for sure.
This is my chance at redemption.
It's the long game.
Soccer, right? They'll all want to be engineers or physicists.
Yeah.
They won't want to be biologists. But in all seriousness, I look forward to the day that our kids play together.
Yeah, I think there's something. So the family dinner, the ritual of the family dinner, but also the special occasion dinners, where there's a little bit more preparation, a little bit more cooking, whether it's on the weekend or for some holiday. In Russia, it was a thing that actually I find completely missing for the most part. In America, is there was neighbors. There was you broke the walls between families much more commonly. Like there would be kind of regular characters, like a sitcom almost. If you watch a sitcom, it's never just the family. There's always like other characters that
just bursting in the door.
I'm gonna
start doing that here just to make you feel at home. Just start showing up at your studio. I know where you live. So.
I think people want to respect, Michael Malice lives next door to me, and I think people want to respect each other's privacy or something like that. And I think we all get super busy, and like. It's kind of work to do this dinner together, or if you see it as a thing that needs to be scheduled, it's work. We get busy. There's a lot of stuff going on, but if it's part of a ritual, a part of the culture, all of those walls get broken down, and then you realize that's like later looking back, those are the things you miss. It's like that's what life is about. Like all the stupid stuff you're doing in terms of career or whatever, all the busy things, those don't matter. What matters. It's the people. And
in academia, this changed in the last few years, of course. But one of the great joys was professors will stop by your office or your lab. Nobody set up an appointment. There's a guy when I was a professor in San Diego, a guy named Harvey Cartney. He's a member of the National Academy. He's truly the world's expert in the evolution of vision and evolution of brains generally. And he would show up in my lab, and he would just start talking to the students and postdocs. And I mean, a pure encyclopedia. And then at some point you'd say, "Hey, Harvey, I got to go," and you'd kick him out, right? Or this guy, he's a physicist, David Kleinfeld, who's same way. Actually, David Kleinfeld's an interesting one. A student of his went on to create the Beavis and Butthead cartoon, and one of them is David. He's a physics professor. Nice. Now people can look him up. And David's one of those guys who just walk into your office, you just sit down and you just start talking to you. And so there's a kind of a family feel. It's like Cheers or Seinfeld or one of those shows where somebody just walks in. And yeah, I think you and I both share a love of the community around things. And podcasting is a little bit more isolated. I should say for the guest episodes, the preparation is completely different because it's more conversational. And so there, I don't do any of this business of putting myself into state. I just try and make sure that the guest is taken care of. And I do list out the questions I'm going to ask before, but those I actually really like the interview episodes far more than I like doing the solo ones.
Just psychologically, you mean?
I just like learning from someone directly.
Yeah.
Because you asking an expert about something, like sitting here with you when we recorded the podcast where you were a guest on the Huberman Lab podcast, and for the first time and finally, someone was explaining to me the difference between machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all these other things. You know, and I've finally forgiven you for making me cry about Costello on camera, but because it helped me move through it. But in all seriousness, the interview ones are a sheer pleasure. The solo ones I really enjoy, but they're work. Sometimes I think like I'm going to sweat a little blood prepping for them.
Well, it's interesting because I do think prepping for interviews is having a similar process might be also very valuable.